At the very beginning of the story, the man could hardly believe what he was seeing. The woman sitting across from him didn't say a word. She simply reached out, unwrapped the chocolate on the table, and started eating it. She paid no attention to the people around them, as if the chocolate had belonged to her all along. She ate slowly and casually. The man froze on the spot. A flash of surprise and confusion crossed his face. Not wanting to look completely caught off guard, he broke off a piece of chocolate himself, and put it into his mouth. Then he looked up at her. His eyes filled with quiet defiance, as if they were engaged in a silent standoff. But the woman seemed completely unfazed. If anything, she found the situation even more amusing. She broke off another piece, and calmly ate it. This strange little moment left both of them feeling an unspoken sense of fun. They couldn't help but smile, and a subtle sense of connection hung in the air. Just as Cameron was about to speak, the train arrived at the station. Before leaving, the woman stood up, and gave him a meaningful look. Cameron remained where he was, not quite sure what that look meant. It wasn't until later, when he prepared to get off the train himself, that he suddenly realized something. The chocolate he had bought was still sitting untouched in his pocket. Only then did he understand how absurd the whole situation had been. From beginning to end, it had all been a misunderstanding, but since fate had already brought them together, the story wasn't about to end just like that. The next morning, Cameron saw the woman again on the train. To ease the awkwardness from before, he gave her a portrait he had drawn himself. As a gift, the drawing responded to the chocolate misunderstanding, and quietly revealed his interest in her. They smiled at each other, and the atmosphere instantly felt lighter. Cameron gathered his courage, hoping the encounter might lead somewhere. But once again, the train stopped at the station. He could only say goodbye in a hurry. The moment he turned away, regret rushed in. Just then, the woman called out to him. She handed the drawing back, and gestured for him to look again. Cameron flipped the paper over. When his eyes landed on the note written on the paper cup, his face lit up. With a smile as pure as a child's, happiness quietly arrived in that moment. From then on, their relationship deepened rapidly. Their love was mutual, natural, and passionate. Before long, they got married, and welcomed a lovely son. Their small family was filled with happiness. However, fate wasn't always kind. Recently, Cameron had begun to feel dizzy more and more often. Sometimes the entire world spun in an instant. No matter how hard he tried to stay conscious, his body eventually gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. After medical tests, the doctors delivered cruel news. He had an incurable disease. Cameron tried several times to tell his wife, but every time, he stopped just before the words came out. He remembered how she had suffered deeply after losing a loved one in the past. Back then, she had almost shut herself off from the world. Cameron knew she couldn't endure another blow like that, so he buried his fear and helplessness deep inside. He looked at the smiles on his wife and son's faces, knowing how fragile that happiness truly was. In this era, technology had reached incredible heights. Self-driving cars were everywhere, and holographic interfaces had replaced phones. Most terminal illnesses had already been cured, yet Cameron's disease was one of the rare few that still had no solution. At the same time, cloning technology had become nearly perfect. It offered an option, not to extend life, but to create another self. This self would carry all his memories and habits, and could continue loving his family. Cameron stood at a painful crossroads. Should he tell the truth, or let a clone take his place, and protect the family instead? In the end, he chose the latter. He decided to let love continue in this way. With mixed emotions, Cameron sought out the doctor at the cloning facility, and volunteered for the program. That decision set his fate on an entirely different path. Before long, Cameron met that other self for the first time. The moment he truly saw him, he was stunned. The man standing in front of him wasn't just someone who looked like him. From facial features to posture, from expressions to stance, every detail said the same thing. This was another Cameron. It was like a reflection, stepping out of a flawless mirror. The only differences were a small mole on the clone's hand, and a healthier body, free of disease. Cameron had rehearsed this moment countless times in his head. He thought he was prepared, but when it actually happened, a powerful wave of unease rose within him. He realized he couldn't accept the reality calmly. That instinctive resistance nearly took his breath away. In the end, he temporarily halted the plan. Cameron returned home. His gaze fell on his gentle wife and intelligent son. He smiled, but something stabbed painfully inside his chest. The more ordinary happiness he saw, the more it hurt. Tears quietly welled up in his eyes. He knew he couldn't just leave like this. Maybe letting another Cameron stay behind was truly the best choice. So he returned to the cloning facility once again. The doctor had already seen through his hesitation. To reassure him, the doctor introduced another participant in the program, a woman with a young daughter. Her life was completely different from Cameron's, yet they faced the same ending. As her life approached its end, she had also chosen silence, and let her clone protect her family. With doubt and uncertainty, Cameron met the woman's clone. She was living a life nearly identical to the original. What shocked him even more was that neither she nor her family noticed anything unusual. Their ordinary happiness was being quietly maintained by a copied life. That moment marked the first time Cameron truly believed his family could remain happy without him. After making up his mind, he returned home and told his wife he needed to travel for work. On the surface, it was business. In truth, he was cutting emotional ties. He then went alone to the facility and restarted the cloning process. Under the doctor's doctor's supervision, the memory transfer officially began. The chair slowly reclined, and Cameron's consciousness seemed to drain away, flowing bit by bit, into the other him. Fragments of a lifetime appeared in the clone's mind. The awkward first meeting, quiet nights after marriage, every day spent with his child. Memory after memory lit up. When the transfer ended, those memories that once belonged only to Cameron had fully merged with the clone. The moment the clone opened his eyes, his life's path completely overlapped with Cameron's. The doctor explained his identity, but the clone showed no resistance. Those memories of family felt as real as a lifetime lived firsthand. Meanwhile, Cameron was video calling his son. Their laughter filled the screen. Then sudden dizziness struck again, and he collapsed. Before losing consciousness, he hurriedly ended the call. In that moment, he understood more clearly than ever. His time was running out. When he faced the clone again, he felt unexpectedly calm. No words were necessary. They both knew what responsibility each of them carried. Still, to fully complete the replacement, the clone needed an adjustment period. They had to live together and erase any possible flaws in everyday life. Soon they realized there were almost no differences at all. Habits, reactions, personalities. They were essentially the same person. The only difference left was vitality. Cameron's body was weakening, while the clone had a healthy future ahead. The first real test arrived quickly. The clone would replace Cameron and speak with his wife. The moment the call connected, the clone slipped into the role effortlessly. The conversation felt natural and smooth. Standing nearby, Cameron couldn't stay calm. Anger, jealousy, and loss flooded over him at once. He felt himself being replaced piece by piece. In the end, he abruptly ended the call. That sudden action ignited a fierce confrontation. Long suppressed emotions spilled out completely. But at the peak of the argument, Cameron's illness struck again. Pain forced him to curl up on the floor. In that instant, all arguments lost their meaning. The clone finally remembered the most important truth. He was the replacement. The doctor reassured him, saying this wasn't a mistake, because from the moment the memories were transferred, he had already become another Cameron. The conflict made everything clear. They had to accept each other and complete the handoff. The clone apologized, and Cameron knew the ending could no longer be changed. At that moment, a desperate thought crossed his mind. He wanted to go home one last time. As himself, Cameron went home. Dragging his weakening body, he stood before the familiar door. The warmth of home was within reach. But suddenly, violent dizziness struck again. His body completely gave out, and he collapsed hard onto the ground. Through the footage transmitted by his glasses, the clone and the doctor saw everything. If his wife discovered him now, everything they had planned would fall apart. Fortunately, Cameron regained consciousness. Relying on sheer will, he slowly pulled himself up. Every step felt like walking on blades. He staggered to the car and collapsed into the back seat. Through the window, he looked at the house nearby. His wife's figure, blurred in the light, as if separated by a river. He could never cross again. Eventually, the car brought him back to the facility. At that moment, Cameron understood better than anyone. He no longer had the right to stay in that home. The clone officially took his place. The transition was smoother than expected. His wife never suspected a thing. Everything seemed the same as before, until the moment the clone embraced her. When the family dog suddenly barked wildly, animals sensed the difference. But his wife was lost in the reunion, and paid no attention. The real Cameron could only watch from afar through a screen. He stared greedily at his wife and child's faces, and finally understood why he had chosen cloning in the first place. But then, the weight of being replaced crashed down on him. The life that once belonged to him now existed only through a screen. As time passed, Cameron began to notice changes. The clone wore the glasses less and less. The doctor explained this meant the clone was fully integrating into life. Though Cameron resisted, he chose to endure it. As long as his family was happy, he was willing to bear everything. Until one day, a nightmare shattered his calm. He dreamed the clone hurt his wife. Fear overwhelmed reason. Cameron secretly left the facility and returned home. He made no sound and dared not move forward. He only entered the study. There, he saw the clone's finished artwork. As an illustrator, Cameron knew instantly, only someone emotionally stable could create work like this. When he turned on the computer, he saw his family laughing, a happiness he had never witnessed before. His doubts slowly faded. Then the clone appeared behind him. In that moment of eye contact, Cameron expected anger. Instead, he saw understanding. The clone gave him a true chance to say goodbye. They exchanged clothes. Cameron went into his son's room and gently woke him. Father and son sat in the living room, snacking and laughing together. The child didn't know this was a farewell. That smile was bright and warm. Cameron engraved every second deep into his heart. Then he entered the bedroom and held his wife tightly. All his love and reluctance poured into that embrace. She comforted him gently, never suspecting a thing. In that moment, Cameron finally felt at peace. Before leaving, he solemnly handed the ring to the clone. It was not just a transfer of identity, but of complete trust. No words were needed. He believed the clone would protect the family with all his love. As the car disappeared into the night, the two lives completely separated. Not long after, the doctor told Cameron the clone's memory of being cloned had been erased. Now, he was the Cameron of the past. Hearing this, Cameron felt calm, because this was exactly the ending he wanted. At the end, the doctor handed him a gift, a video recording. It captured his wife's voice, leaving behind memories of love. And there, the story quietly came to an end.